Religious humanism is a blend of humanist ethical thought and congregational rituals. Religious humanists differ from secular humanists in that they see the humanist life stance as a religion and value the richness of community as a vital element of it. In the United States, religious humanists most often affiliate with the Ethical Culture Society and/or Unitarian Universalism. Religious humanism has been a part of my new identity for many years, yet I found that my beliefs do not fit neatly into its various strains. My goal this morning is to explain where my beliefs come from. Then I invite you to come with me on a journey to understand the ideas behind humanism and their influence on Unitarian Universalism. I instinctively respond to a walk in the woods, or a beautiful sunset, or a view that takes my breath away. This stirs a sense of mystery, of wonder, or sometimes even feelings of reverence in response to the beauty of the natural world. I didn't realize that this was a particular aspect of religious humanism known as religious naturalism. In Reason and Reverence, Religious Humanism for the 21st Century, William R. Murray writes, religious naturalism is a variety of naturalism which involves a set of beliefs and attitudes that there are religious aspects of the world which can be appreciated within a naturalistic framework. So let's begin with a quick review of the history of humanism. The roots of modern humanism go back to classical Greek and Roman philosophy through the work of Protagoras, Democritus, Epicurus, and others, beginning in the 5th century BCE. Their view of a materialistic world, one made only of or dependent on matter, was the basis for much of their early thinking. Democritus developed the concept of the atom, which in Greek meant indivisible, and the idea that everything was made up of atoms. Impressive, given that he lived almost 2,500 years ago. Epicurus had a philosophy of radical materialism. He established a complete and independent philosophical system on the purpose of human life, an empiricist theory of knowledge, an understanding of nature based on atomistic materialism, and a naturalistic view of evolution. Arabic scholars in the 8th and 9th century translated the words of Greek and Roman philosophy for a Muslim audience. They then explored the classical ideas through their own writings on love, poetry, history, and philosophy. The early Renaissance scholars like Plutarch rediscovered the Greek and Roman philosophers and their treatises through Arabic translations. It was through the study of these ancient texts that they eventually developed the ideas that would form the background for the Protestant Reformation. This included an emphasis on this world rather than the next, and that human beings were not morally depraved as traditional Christianity professed, but instead of ethical and intellectual value. Humanist values spread outside of Italy through the texts and the people who came to study them. As individuals came to learn, they then returned to their own countries, bringing the humanistic study of the philosophers and poets of classical culture and their values with them. Printing presses dedicated to ancient texts were founded in Venice, Basel, and Paris. By the end of the 15th century CE, the focal point of humanism had moved from Italy to Northern Europe. Erasmus of Rotterdam became the leading humanist scholar in the region. Although he was a Catholic priest, Erasmus used humanist methods for studying classical texts and arranged new Latin and Greek editions of the New Testament. These translations raised questions which would be important in the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. The Protestant Reformation was an essential link in the eventual emergence of religious humanism. Luther's core tenet to the Reformation was the priesthood of all believers. This meant that, contrary to Catholic teaching, individuals could directly connect to God without intermediaries such as priests. The implication of this idea was that each person has access to the divine, and therefore each person is responsible for his or her own religious life. It would take centuries for this to be fully understood and become a part of religious practice. The Enlightenment of the 18th century used reason to attack superstition, bigotry, intolerance, and religious fanaticism. Immanuel Kant argued that scientific knowledge, morality, and religious belief are mutually consistent because they all rest on the principle of human autonomy. The skeptical philosophy of David Hume and the empiricism of John Locke became the building blocks of the modern empirical and skeptical worldviews. Ludwig Feuerbach suggested that God is a human invention, a combination of the best attributes and highest values human beings can emulate. The academic analysis of the Bible, with its emphasis on historical, critical, and textual study, also played a part in the development of religious humanism. That inquiry cast doubt on the uniqueness of the central tenet of Christianity. If the saga of a dying and rising divine being was widespread in a variety of religious movements of the 1st century BC, then how was Jesus' story any different from the others? But the most important influence on the development of modern Judaism was science and the scientific method. Copernicus's heliocentric model placed the sun, rather than the earth, at the center of our solar system. This led people to question the creation story and its human-centric view. Darwin's theory of natural selection offered even more support for the rejection of the creation stories in the Bible and the biblical concept that man was a special creation of God. One cannot reconcile natural selection, which lays out evidence for a much older planet, and the view that man is merely a part of the natural world, with the creation myth. This perspective of man as a natural being without a supernatural element of his soul also resulted in a complete questioning of the Christian ideas of immortality and the existence of a mystical realm after the death of the body. Transcendentalists, such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, welcomed the insights from the origin of species. Transcendentalist ideas, like Emerson's criticism of the repression of the church and the Bible, its vision of a divine spark in each person, the value of free inquiry, and the full flourishing of the Reformation idea of personal religious experience all contributed to our modern understanding of religious humanism. Understandably, some 19th century Unitarians were drawn to these new ideas. Many of these thinkers doubted or did not believe in a divine being at all. Some of the most famous names from our tradition were part of this. Frances Fanny Wright, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the openly atheistic Ernestine L. Rose, and Robert G. Ingersoll, known as the Great Agnostic. During World War I, 2 Unitarian ministers, Don Dietrich and Curtis Reese, began preaching a religion without God. Reese called it a religion of democracy, while Dietrich called it humanism. However they named it, their beliefs were similar. Dietrich and Reese advocated for social change and freedom of belief, gaining the ire of conservatives in the Unitarian movement. In the 1920s, this clash of ideas resulted in a serious dispute, both at the movement's General Assembly, then called the May meetings, and in Unitarian publications. Although the disputes were heated, Dietrich and Reese ultimately prevailed, and humanism became a significant part of the Unitarian movement. In the 1920s, some ministerial students at the University of Chicago and his Unitarian partner, Meadville Theological School, embraced the new ideas of humanism. The students organized the Humanist Fellowship in 1933. They thought there should be a statement summarizing the beliefs of humanism, which was published in that year as the Humanist Manifesto. It was signed by 34 of the day's leading philosophers, such as John Dewey, and Unitarian ministers, including Don Dietrich and Curtis Reese. The statement of principles proclaimed humanism as a vital new religious alternative for the 20th century. The beliefs set forth in it include: the natural universe is all there is no supernatural realm, the universe is self-existing and not created, human beings evolved as part of nature, and religion and human culture are the creations of humankind not a result of divine revelation. The Humanist Manifesto maintained that ethics and values spring from human experience and reflection. It argued through the enhancement of human life through democracy and a more equitable distribution of wealth. It's not hard to see the core of these values reflected in Unitarian Universalism's principles. In retrospect, particularly in light of the atrocities of World War II, many felt this first statement of humanist principles was overly optimistic and somewhat passionless. That document was followed by a second Humanist Manifesto in 1973, and 30 years later, the American Humanist Association issued Humanism and its Aspirations, Humanist Manifesto 3. This latest declaration was signed by 11 Unitarian Universalist ministers. In his essay, 100 Years of Unitarian Universalist Humanism, From Unionist Voices in Unitarian Universalism, William R. Murray writes that each manifesto uses language and ideas that reflect its own time and incorporate contemporary social concerns. Issues addressed in Humanist Manifesto 3 include ideas that were not imagined in 1933, such as reproductive rights, environmental concerns, rights for LGBTQIA, and naturalistic humanism. Humanist Manifesto 3 summarizes ideals with the following words, which continue to inspire me. Humanists are concerned for the well-being of all, are committed to diversity, and respect those of differing yet humane point of view. We work to uphold the equal enjoyment of human rights and civil liberties in an open, secular society, and maintain it as a civic duty to participate in the democratic process and a planetary duty to protect nature's integrity, diversity, and beauty in a secure, sustainable manner. The UU Humanist Association, the UUHA, was founded in 1962 as a Fellowship of Religious Humanists. The UUHA is committed to humanist principles of reason, compassion, and human fulfillment in the Humanist Manifesto and the 7 principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association. The organization distinguishes between the term religion, which it uses to define beliefs and practices that rely on a supernatural entity, and the term religious, which refers to the natural human desires for a beloved and accepting community, a purpose greater than ourselves, rituals and practices that resonate with our common humanity and shared mortality, and opportunities to work with other people to do good in the world and to help one another attain the greatest possible fulfillment in life. What I loved about reading Humanist Voices in Unitarian Universalism was that the array of essays in it gave me a broad view of the many branches of humanism. These range from the very secular humanists to those who embrace naturalistic spirituality, with agnostics, atheists, and theists belonging somewhere under the large umbrella. With the resurgence of spiritual language and the emphasis on spiritual growth in our denomination, some humanists feel out of place and maybe a little left out. Well, I'm still trying to figure out where my own beliefs fit into all this. I take great comfort in knowing that I am not alone in my journey. I am following in the footsteps of generations of Unitarians, Universalists, and others who contributed a great deal to the humanist, religious naturalists, and related varieties within our denomination and outside of it. I hope some of you join me on this path. If anyone is interested in learning more about religious humanism, I have a list of titles I found informative. Thank you.